Luxon and his friends had a great time at their event. There were a lot of historical artifacts and texts, and it was quite enjoyable. The gala lasted all day and had performers and short films, and it was very entertaining and enjoyable. When it was all over, it was time for them to have dinner before they departed. They had a place reserved for them so they could all eat together without the hassle of finding a spot big enough for their group. They shared great stories and overall had a great time. They all knew each other, but had never had anyone in the same place at the same time. Luxton decided he wanted to address everyone. My fellows, I want you to look around and see all of these great people that we have together. They all looked around and smiled and patted each other on the shoulders. We're here, united under one cause, and I think this is going to be a great year for us. They all cheered and slammed on their tables. This troubled Luxon for a second. He decided not to get them too excited. I also want to take a second for us to remember everyone who couldn't be here for one reason or another. They may not be here physically, but they are here in spirit. Everyone mellowed down and nodded solemnly. There was a lot of eating and bonds being created into the evening, and then everyone remembered they wanted to get on the freeway before dark. In this city, like most of the cities, getting on the freeway was an absolute pain. They all went outside and saw what looked like a huge storm on the horizon. They all just stared at it quizzically, like it meant something, some kind of cryptic message that they should be able to understand. Then they heard a commotion at the grocery store across the street. Chapter 12, Knuckles, Hardware and Protest. Afternoon. Hold on. Earlier. There we go. Nope. Hiya. Knuckles was all ready to head home and Trip checked. The traffic looked a little better now, and then he remembered that he also wanted some materials for a project he was working on at home. He checked his phone and found the hardware store. It was nearby. When Knuckles got to the hardware store, he got some cursory looks, then everyone left him alone. He picked out the objects he needed, some nuts and bolts and brackets. He was about to purchase everything when he looked in the cooler next to the checkout. There was a huge bottle of water there, so he decided to add that to his proverbial basket. After he went out to his car, his truck, he prepared to finally head home. He had procrastinated long enough. He put the items he had purchased in the... Drive a truck? Didn't he drive a truck there? This is going to be embarrassing later. Then he heard commotion down the street. What was that? He wondered. Well, there was a protest going on. Knuckles put on his plastic shell gloves. He always kept with him. And went down to see what was going on. As he got closer, Knuckles saw some peaceful protesters. He shrugged at himself and then heard a smash. He rushed over to see what happened, and someone in black clothing had tossed a brick through a window during the peaceful protest. That did not make Knuckles happy at all, and he chased after the person who did it. They would see justice if he had to drag them to the police all by himself. Knuckles chased after the black-clad vandal only to turn a corner and ran into 4 more of them. Knuckles stretched his head from side to side, and then the other. All 5 of them rushed Knuckles at the same time. He simply grinned. When there was no more fight left in the 5 attackers, Knuckles went back to the store that was being protested against. It was a gun store. Knuckles decided the best thing to do to protect this locally owned business was to stand in front of the smashed window. It was barred still, of course, but it seemed to Knuckles like the right thing to do. He would stay in front of the store until they left. Then he would help out the store owner to repair the damage in preparation of the bitter night climate right off the coast. There were 30 or so protesters yelling and screaming about whatever. Knuckles didn't care. He toned it all out. He'd heard it so many times before. He thought to himself, these must be the few remaining idiots that blame guns instead of going out to get their own. Most of the people of their ideology had resigned that guns were actually were the answer for self-defense a year or so earlier. The protest went on for about an hour or so until some young men in matching polos came and stood next to Knuckles. He remembered hearing about this group, formed by a brave warrior who fought many black-clad troublemakers, armed with only a stick and shield. They had been beating up defenseless elderly people who believed differently about speech of all things. Knuckles was glad to have these polo-wearing heroes on his side, real warriors. They stood shoulder to shoulder until the mob left. After the mob dispersed, the group of well-disciplined gentlemen took off as well. Presumably, they were looking for more of these events. Knuckles wanted to follow them, but remembered about the store. He knocked and walked inside, and there was a jingle at the door, and he was met with an AR pointing low and ready towards him from the counter. Knuckles put his hands out to his sides innocently, but the store owner recognized him from the front by his gloves. "You're fine," the storekeeper said with an exhale and put his AR away. "I'm here to help you secure your store for the night," Knuckles said, as if this was a normal thing that was already on the schedule. "No need," said the shopkeeper. "They'll be back. Insurance doesn't cover riot damage." "What do we do?" Knuckles asked, confused, as if his big plan was unraveled already. "We need to empty the store, but I can't do it alone. Can you help?" "Sure, let me go get my vehicle. It has enough room for all of this," Knuckles said zappily, thinking his new plan was grand. The storekeeper thought about it for a second and didn't have much choice. He knew he'd have to get the product all out in one run, and there was no way he could do it alone with the vehicle he had. Knuckles texted his wife to let her know, and went to get his vehicle. He told the store owner he would be right back. On the way to his truck, Knuckles looked up at the horizon as the sun started to get near it. It looked like a huge storm was coming. He got in his big SUV. Yes, he wasn't a car, it was an SUV. And headed back to the gun shop. The owner knew who it was right away because it was smattered with Patriot stickers. Right then, the owner knew that the right guy had arrived at the right time. The owner told Knuckles where to pull around the building. The owner knew he couldn't risk these being stolen overnight or damaged by the weather. His livelihood would be ruined. Together, they loaded all the firearms and as much ammo as they could into the vehicle. As the sun started to set, they completed loading up Knuckles' vehicle and closed it up. They both got in the vehicle and prepared to drive away. Chapter 13, Malaise, Party Time, Evening. Malaise had about a half an hour to get back across town before it got dark. She walked at a very brisk pace, feeling like things weren't right. There were a lot of people shopping for grocery food, way more than usual. She thought that was weird. The closer she got to her and her dad's condo, she realized that the grocery lines were going out the store. People were cramming in. She snapped a photo with her camera and went to send it to her dad. Her phone. That's when she realized her prior message never sent. She sent it off and sent the photo. She rushed to the condo feeling very uneasy. From her window facing west, she could see a huge storm rolling in. From the north, she could see a lot of street activity. She'd never been happier to be home. She just really wished her daddy was there. She checked her messages and nothing had been received. She made sure her messages had sent, and they had. Maybe her dad was already stuck in the storm and he was too busy, or there was some interference. She knew he would be okay, though. He was on an amazing ship that could stand up to huge ocean storms easily. Or so she would at least hope. It was getting late, and she wanted to get ready for the party. She changed out of her work uniform into her outfit for the costume party. The costume comprised of a pair of black light-absorbent legs with huge cargo pockets. She wouldn't be carrying a pack with her costume, so she needed a place to stuff all of her important items. Next was her top. It was a full-sleeve leather piece with buckles that could be tightened. She thought back to the running from location to location and decided to change into a more athletically supportive undergarments and put on a thermal top on top of that for warmth. Over the thermal, she put on her leather, and before buckling her top, remembered to put on her boots. She had a pair of steel-toed military boots that she had purchased online. The female sizes were incredibly easy to get nearly for free, since they weren't in high demand. These were easily multiple $100 boots that she got for about $20. Steel-toed, reinforced soles, anti-slippery, and huge treads. She laced them up to the top and buckled down her leather top and cinched the straps tight. She stood up and looked in the mirror. She looked exactly how she imagined. Oh, I almost forgot. She dug through her pack and pulled out the mask. It was a Milsurp Israeli gas mask she bought online. It had the circular eyelets and now a giant bird beak that concealed the breathing apparatus ports. She grabbed a filter to see if it still fit, and it did. She was very satisfied. She didn't need the filter, so she set it aside, remembering that she needed to put her gloves on, so she did. She was now completely black-clad as a crow, inspired by the plague doctors of the 17th century. She fit an updated version of this perfectly.